when we have our closed discussion meetings, usually or always around topics out of AA literature. And on Thursday nights we have our open speaker meeting. And several of y'all have been there. And speaker meetings have always been my most favorite meeting to attend. Just always enjoyed getting lost in people's stories with them. You know, you don't have to sit there and think about what you're going to say when somebody calls on you or anything like that. But I much prefer sitting out there with y'all than being up here. But I know that this is part of the deal, and it is a great privilege to be asked to share something about my experience here in Alcoholics Anonymous and how finding a God here has changed my life. I live in Wendell, which is a little small town about 25 minutes east of Raleigh. I've lived there my whole life, grew up there. There's not much to say about that town. There ain't a whole lot going on there. It's a good place to drink and have a good time, and because you could always find something to get into though. But growing up there, the people there knew my family, and they knew my grandparents and all that stuff, or the police, and so I just didn't get in a lot of trouble as a kid. But I've drank for as long as I can remember. There's pictures of me as a little kid turning up one of the family members' beers, and my father, I'm leaning away from my father and he's leaning in trying to take it from me. And I've just always enjoyed the taste. At that age, I was just strictly a beer drinker. The liquor didn't come till later on, but I never did get enough to where I could get drunk until I was 12 years old. And up until that point, I remember for several months just trying to work things out to where I could get enough booze to where I could catch a buzz off of it. And finally things worked out for me. I just remember always being disappointed when you couldn't get any more. And that carried on, of course, after getting drunk the first time, probably even more so then. But I don't know if I was born an alcoholic or what. I just was always obsessed with drinking. And I remember the liquor bottles growing up. I was fascinated with the Maker's Mark bottle with the fake wax running down the side of it, and the worm in the tequila. You know, it's just all that stuff fascinated me. But I was also a kid that had every reason in the world not to ever take a drink because of what my father's drinking did, and with, you know, in regards to my family. And he was just a mean drunk, and when he wasn't drinking, he was even meaner. And I've learned a lot about him through being in Alcoholics Anonymous and working with others, and taking these steps and being an alcoholic myself that's helped me to accept him and learn to love him before he passed, and for us to get a good relationship. But I hated that man probably up till my first 6 months sober, my whole life. I got sober at 23, and my mom, she was probably one of the best moms in the world. She was the Baptist in my family. My father was the alcoholic. That's typically what you hear up here at speaker meetings. One's the church goer and one's the drunk. And that's how it worked out in my family. And I grew up in church. I hated going to church. But once I got there and around my friends, it was okay. But even though it was a Baptist church, I don't ever remember them sending us to hell or anything. I remember a lot of caring, loving people trying to teach us about a loving God, and several times as a youngster I needed and wanted that, but I just could not connect up to it. I couldn't do the things that they wanted me to do. And in my mind, that meant I'd have to be a missionary in Afghanistan or somewhere or become a preacher. But all that they wanted you to do is just walk down the aisle and accept God in your life. But my mind just, I swear, my fears blew it up into. And drinking got a hold of me before God did. And drinking did for me everything that I needed it to, everything that I hoped it would. It made me feel like I was the man. It connected me with other people. It made things in life make sense to me to where I can navigate it. But at the same time, it slowly started destroying everything good in my life. Relationships with family, my respect in the community, my dealings with the police, dealings in school. It started affecting everything. And I think I just stayed in trouble from the beginning. From the age of 12 to 14, I was pretty much a weekend drinker whenever I can get my hands on it. From 14 to my first attempts at getting sober at 21, it was an everyday, all-day thing. And I grew up working for my father. He owned his own painting business, and that line of work, pretty much the party just goes on all day long. And so for my drinking, it was accepted there on the job like that, not by my father, but all the other people that worked for him. And it was a place that you can get by and be drunk at work. And I barely graduated high school. The only reason I graduated high school because I cheated my way through high school. From 7th to 12th grade, I figured if I didn't stay there at school, my dad would make me work, which he did on the weekends and holidays and every time I got suspended anyway. But it was meant less work for me. And also, school was where the girls were. School was where you found out where the parties were. And that's why I even put forth that much effort to get through school. And after graduating school, I went to work with my father full-time. And full-time with him wasn't 40 hours a week. It was 7 days a week from 5:30 in the morning until he got ready to quit. And back then, I saw myself in that life and assumed that I would continue that for the rest of my life. But shortly after getting out of high school, problems started compounding for me. I started getting in a lot of trouble with the police. Back up real quick. My first visit to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was 16 years old by way of a DWI. I think I had my driver's license for 2 months. They were revoked by my parents for 1 month for coming home drunk. And then the same week, they let me start back driving again. That's when the state of North Carolina revoked them from me. And my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting was there in that small town I live in. I remember sitting in there. There's a bunch of old men in there smoking cigarettes and cussing. I thought that was interesting. I'd never seen that in the church before. I remember the window shades with the 12 steps and 12 traditions. I guess I must have stared at them the whole time, just petrified of having to be in there. And I remember at the end of the meeting, this one old man cussed everybody out at the end of the meeting. And that was my first introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm so grateful that that isn't what Alcoholics Anonymous is. What I've learned Alcoholics Anonymous to be is groups like this group here. But that meeting's still pretty much going on the same way. It's still going. You might go there one night and it'll be a meeting on gratitude, and the next Wednesday night it'll be a meeting on the country song they heard on the radio that day. And the next one, it may be another meeting on gratitude. They like gratitude a lot around there. I chaired a meeting there on the 7th step one time, and 2 people got up and left the room, left the building, parking lot and everything. And that's, well, skipping forward now. Got another DWI at the age of 20. I had a fake ID probably since I was 18, so I was already drinking in bars and stuff, and I got that DWI, and which wasn't a big deal. Everybody I knew had DWIs, and it was just an inconvenience, really. But shortly after that, just things started getting really out of control with my drinking and my choices and the trouble I was getting into. And I can't remember a lot from pretty much that DWI to me getting sober at 23. Got arrested a lot, had a lot of court dates, went to see a probation officer a whole bunch. Went to a couple of treatment centers, a couple of outpatient treatment centers. And what did it for me in the end was I had my bright light Bill Wilson experience, but my bright lights were blue. And I had been to see my probation officer earlier that week, and he handed me 2, I don't know what it was, but it was 2 things telling me I had to be in court the next week for felony probation violations. And I knew what that meant. I knew that meant that I was going to prison. And what baffled me was he let me go home. I mean, he should have arrested me right there, but I always paid him his little $20 or whatever he wanted. And like I said, I always worked, so I was always working, and I was always on time. I always told him the truth. So I guess he let me go home. And I remember sitting in my room all weekend scared to go anywhere because I had a habit of not showing up for court and scared not to drink. Had a habit of just disappearing and not coming back for several days. I was scared that was going to happen. I was trying to figure out how to tell my parents that I was fixing to go to prison. I was still living at home with them, so I wasn't able to support my own self. And that Sunday, I was watching the race, and I thought that I could have just one beer. And this is after all them treatment centers, arrest, and all that other stuff. And I deserve a beer. I'm fixing to go to prison. And you know how we can quickly convince ourselves that it's okay to take a drink. And, of course, I went and got that beer and was arrested again about 1 o'clock that Monday morning. And sitting in the back of that sheriff's car, I knew that this is all I had to look forward to for the rest of my life. Riding in these sheriff's cars and going to those appointments with the probation officer, going to court, continuing to discuss my family. They were way beyond disappointment with me. And my life was over, and I knew that. And the only thing I had to look forward to was going to prison, and that was my plan. I was just going to jail, and I called my mama like I always done. But I told her I was all right. I was arrested again. I hung up the phone in her face. So I didn't have nothing else to say. But on the other hand, I was sitting in there, and I knew that I'd been coming to AA for a year and a half, off and on, to pick up your white chip and show my parents, I got a white chip. I'd leave it out where they could see it. And I wanted to be sober. I hated coming here. I hated everything about it. Couldn't understand how just coming here was going to get me sober. And so I wasn't aware of any meetings where they talked about the steps or had somebody like myself get up here and speak and talk about how the steps transform their life. I did not want to get the sponsor or the home group and all that, and I just thought that just coming that I could get sober, because that's what it looked like these other guys were doing, and a lot of them were, but I must have been a lot worse case than those guys were. I don't know. I knew that I hadn't done everything that y'all been telling me to do, and I made a deal with myself that I'm going to come back to AA. I knew AA was in prison. I've been to enough meetings to hear about it. I'm going to come back to AA and do every single thing y'all are telling me to do. And then if it doesn't work, then I could go ahead and drink and do like I'm doing and continue living like an animal and not have to feel guilty about it anymore. And my sister bailed me out about 24 hours later, and even after that experience, just like Bill Wilson, even after he knew that he was beat by alcohol, he still drank, because just knowing you're beat by alcohol and being powerless, that's all you are. You're just dead meat. There's nothing you could do about it. And I drank like I always did when I got out of jail and started my court dates. And that Tuesday on the way home from court, I stopped and got a beer, and I drank half of it and threw the other half out the window. And I remember thinking to myself, I can't take this anymore. It wasn't the drinking. It wasn't that big a deal. It was just the overwhelming consequences that were on me. As the book says, my problems were piling up on me and becoming astonishingly difficult to solve. And next night, I got on my knees. It was a Wednesday night. I prayed and I asked God to put somebody there at that meeting for me to ask him to be my sponsor. The guy that I wanted to talk to wasn't there, but another guy was there. He's a guy that's been in and out for years and years. He's got 5 years sober now, but he's helped a lot of people, and I was one of them. He took me away from that Wendell meeting and took me out to Wilson, where I started meeting people like Wallace, Whalen, my sponsor, his sponsor, a lot of guys that's been up here to speak, and to a group called the Principals Group of Wilson. And sitting in that meeting, those people were talking about steps, they were talking about home group, sponsorship, and I knew that that's where I needed to be. It was about a 35-minute drive from my house. The meetings I was going to were all 5 and 10 minutes away from me. And they had 4 different meetings 3 times a week, and I made that my home group out there. I got my sponsor from out there, and I started going there every time the doors were open. And that's where I learned everything I know about Alcoholics Anonymous. And And it was a group just like this group here. Me and another young guy hooked up when he was out home from college and started traveling around to different groups. We used to come out here a lot on Thursday night, especially if we knew y'all were having some big power speaker out here. We'd come out and Alcoholics Anonymous came alive for me. What made the difference for me, during that 1.5 year period of time I was coming to meetings, I also started going back to church. I didn't know what else to do. I'd sit in there and hope Jesus would just land on me or something. And so I look around church and it looks like those people, all they do is just go to church and their lives are okay. And so that's what I started doing, and I'd sit in there and beside Grandma and just sweat to death. And, they'd start playing them hymns at the end that draw you down towards the front, and I just would not go. And so I believed in God, made a lot of attempts to invite him in my life up to that point, but when I know the night that I asked that guy for some help, that's when I invited God into my life. And that's when he came into my life and started putting me where I needed to be to get sober and to stay sober. I started the steps with my sponsor. The first step was really easy for me. I'd done that months before getting sober. I knew I was powerless over alcohol. And you could just look at my calendar and see how unmanageable my life was with all my court dates and stuff. The fact that I was 23 years old, still living at home with Mom and Dad, that's another indicator my life's unmanageable. I could go on and on, but the part I always missed a lot about this illness, I remember learning about the phenomenon of craving, that when I drank, I start craving alcohol. And I was still young. I'd shake off most of my hangovers way before lunch on the job. And a lot of times, never got a chance to shake it off. I just kept right on drinking. But I never experienced like the phenomenon of craving as like a lot of the older members of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've listened to a lot of the old CDs of the first members. The first speakers I ever heard was Gertrude Brown and Robert Howell, two of the worst drunks other than Wallace that North Carolina has ever put out. And, I never drank like those people. It never made me as sick as it did them. So I'd never drink as long as they did, but I could identify with them, how they felt and everything. But I always missed the other part of this illness, the mental obsession, where my mind would convince me it's okay to take a drink. I would put all my money in the bank on Friday, and before the bank closed, I'd be back there taking it all back out again. And just in a matter of an hour and a half time, that's how much my mind would change. I'd put it all in there, swearing not to drink that weekend. In an hour and a half period of time, I'd be in there getting it all out again. And stuff like that would happen to me over and over. That last drunk that I went on before I got arrested, same thing. Just thought I'd have one beer, watch the race, and everything was going to be okay. And next thing I know, I'm sitting in the back of a sheriff's car. And I would fall for that lie over and over and over. And at 2 months sober, my mind started telling me that stuff again, that I could get away with it. All the court stuff was over with. I didn't have to go to prison. Just got more concurrent probation on top of the other concurrent probation that I was already on. And so I was given another break. And I would keep getting all these breaks, and I would drink again. And I was getting scared about what I was about to do. And So I started telling some people in AA about what was going on. They'd talk with me after the meetings, and I'd get home, and the next day it'd start over again. My mind telling me just I could get away with it over and over, start planning ways to drink. And I started praying at one guy's suggestion to ask God to remove the obsession from me. And pray that prayer over and over and over. And I started doing that. And at the same time, I got a sponsor. I knew that just coming to these meetings were not going to be enough for me, that I had to take those steps if I wanted a chance at staying here. And I started with that sponsor during that 2-week period of time. And I remember at the end of that 2 weeks, I was going to bed one night and I was thanking God for keeping me sober that day. And I remembered I'd only prayed that prayer once that day, asking God to remove the obsession from me, and that was in the morning. And right then, that's all it took for me to know that God was real and that God would work for me. And it showed me how simple and easy it was to make contact with Him. And up until that point, I couldn't figure it out. I'm a guy that if you give me some tools and a bunch of wood and tell me to build this podium right here, I could figure it out. And that's how my mind works, and that's how I approach God. That's how I approached AA. I couldn't figure it out. And all I had to do is just ask somebody for some help and keep praying until I saw some results. And that was step 2 for me. I knew right then that God was real. And step 3 was pretty easy for me. The way I looked at it at times, I was turning my will and my life over to care of Alcoholics Anonymous. And at this point, I knew what was expected of me to do here. And all I had to do was just do that. And that was simple for me, and I could do that. And even today, it's just that simple. I've learned a lot more over time. I've learned a lot more about God. I've learned a lot more about myself. But really, it just comes down to doing that. It's just turning my will and my life over to the care of y'all. I've never been steered wrong here. And step 4, I had that big resentment against my father. That was the biggest resentment I had, and it warped my attitude towards life. It warped everything about me, that one resentment. And when I started writing on that paper about him, it was just like a wave came over me, and I could forgive him because I could understand where he was coming from. He was a guy that had some PTSD from Vietnam. He was a guy that had a hard upbringing. He had every reason in the world to be a mean person. And I understood his alcoholism. I understood how he was just trying to do the best that he could. And that didn't change things because he was still the same person he always was, and he'd bring up that resentment came back often, and dealing with him and working for him. But I've always been able to go back to that forgiveness for him. I've done several 4 steps over the years. Probably the best one I ever done was probably my 3rd one. It was about a half a page long, and that's where it all finally made sense to me, how fear and my self-centeredness ran my whole life. And it took those 4 steps before I could get to that point. And from there, a lot of things got a whole lot easier in life. 6 and 7, my first time through them, I was kind of excited about it because it's just 2 paragraphs in the big book. And I mean, it was just, you know, you didn't have to do any writing or none of that stuff. So I was pretty pumped up about that. It wasn't until my second time through the steps. I rushed through the steps really quick in the beginning, just trying to get the fire off my tail. And the second time through, things started making a lot more sense to me. And second time through on 6 and 7, I could see where character defects caused me problems in my life. And I began to understand that. And I began to learn how to pray to be able to get through that stuff. And every time that I've been willing to pray or do the actions I needed to take in those areas, it was always simple, it was always easy, and it always works. And it still works. It's just a matter of my willingness to do it. 8 and 9, men's were, I don't know, I just wasn't raised in a way where you would apologize for things that you've done. And there wasn't a lot of people on my list. I've made all the men's that my sponsor told me that I could make. There were several that I wanted to make, but he told me it wouldn't be a good idea. But the hardest one was my father, of course, and I waited a year just to make sure that I could be comfortable in my sobriety and knowing that that's the direction I'm headed in. So I didn't want to make that big amends with him and then turn around and drink. And it went just like I thought it would. He wasn't a guy that's used to talking like that. It was more uncomfortable for him than it was for me. But I got it out there and I did it, and our relationship started changing at that point. To the point where one guy was working with us one time, and he told me that he wished he and his father had the same relationship me and my father had. And I couldn't believe it, but looking back, you know, I could see how things had changed and how Alcoholics Anonymous had changed me. The biggest thing I learned in that relationship is to not take his abuse personal. And I always took that stuff personal, and it was just him being the way he is. And there's a lot of times that I'd get caught up in those arguments with him, and I'd have to make amends, and just so I could feel better. So this program had given me a lot of peace immediately when it's been taken from me, that I know it. And that's the whole reason I drink, is just to have that peace, to shut my mind down to where I could just, you know, ease through life and everything wasn't such a big deal all the time. And those steps gave me that. 10, 11, and 12, I've never been a person to sit down and do, like, write out a nightly inventory. My first 2 years sober, I probably called my sponsor every night, except unless I got in real late. And that's where I learned how to inventory myself, is by going through my day with him and telling him what went on today, how I reacted to it, or how I made a big mess of things. And that's how I learned to inventory myself on a daily basis. And I pretty much do like the 12 and 12 talks about, is do the spot check inventories. When that piece is gone, I know immediately, I know I need to figure out why it's gone. And step 11, I continued going to church, and I guess the biggest thing is I wanted to learn about this God so that I could understand to the best I could anyway. And I enjoyed the challenge that it gave me as far as my morals go, as far as my character went. It's just a little extra challenge that you normally don't get here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it changed my life just as much as the steps have. But I never could have grasped any of that stuff without the steps. So there was so much stuff standing in the way between me and God and my attitude towards life that I would have never been able to grasp what they were talking about there. Step 12, the guys that I looked up to in Alcoholics Anonymous, they all volunteered in prisons, and I knew as soon as I got my chance and got off of probation that that's what I was going to do. Nobody asked me to do it. Nobody invited me to do it. I invited myself into it, just like when I'd hear somebody going to speak somewhere in the beginning. I didn't really know a lot of people. They'd be talking about going somewhere to speak, and I'd just invite myself. And can I come? And that's pretty much how I've gone about Alcoholics Anonymous this whole time. I volunteered in prisons for, I think, 13 years, and they closed the one that I was going to. And my whole life, the option of suicide was always there for me. It was always like plan B. I hated life and everything about it, and it was difficult getting through that stuff my first couple of years in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I would just power it down and go to a meeting or do something. And it wasn't really that big of a deal, especially once I got sober. But it was always there. And when I started working with those guys, I was 23, 24. I was trying to sponsor guys. I think the first guy I got all the way through the steps, he got him a stripper girlfriend and relapsed. So, I wasn't having a lot of success with these free guys. And these guys in the prison, they were just thirsty for somebody to come and help them. And I took advantage of that, and I would go up there hours early before the meetings and work with those guys. I'd go up there on Saturday nights. I'd go up there on Sundays and do steps with them. And I had a lot of great experiences there, but that's where my attitude towards life really changed. It wasn't about me anymore. I could see that my purpose in life has nothing to do about me. My purpose is to serve God and to be of service to Him the best that I can. Now that means I got to go to work and I got to support myself during this process. And it's real quick, what my life's like now. There's been a lot of changes the past several years. I got engaged to this girl, and for some reason I always attract like really crazy women. And what I've noticed is they're just like my father, but a lot better looking. And I called that deal off, and at the same time, work got really slow. My father turned this business over to me in 2008, and I kept the same attitude, just like I'd been working for him. I'd walk off the job and go do AA stuff, spend my Saturdays and Sundays doing step work with guys or doing something in AA or hanging out with people in AA. And it was hard to make a living with your hands doing it that way. And then work got really slow, and I got really broke. I almost lost my house, my car. The work van was still in my dad's name, so I wasn't worried about losing that. I could still go to work, but there just wasn't no work there to do. And I started working with another company just to till my work picked back up. And at the same time, I started taking these Dave Ramsey classes. This guy is a big money guru. So I needed to learn how to manage money because obviously I wasn't very good at it. And I learned a lot that's been the biggest change that's come about in my life since then, is my attitude towards money. And you hear a lot, the more you give, the more you get back. That's true some, but the biggest thing I've learned about it is what you get back is freedom from money controlling your life. And the money that I get from all the work that I do is not my money, it's God's money. And I'm just supposed to manage it. And I learned a lot during that process. And also I was about $80,000 in debt, IRS, all kinds of stuff. And I didn't take off from Alcoholics Anonymous. I still went to AA, but I went to work 12, 14, 16 hours a day and paid back all that debt. Got all that stuff taken care of. It took me about 2 years, and that was probably my hardest 2 years sober. Just working like that and living like that, but I still stayed in touch with people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I went to a meeting once a week, once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks. And it was definitely far from what I've been doing. And I never decided I wasn't coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew that I was coming back here, but I had to get this done. And the only way I knew how to do it was with my two hands and God. And when I got all that debt, or close to the end of it, that's when I rejoined my old home group. It's one I'm at now, a group I helped start almost 20 years ago, and got back involved in AA just like I have been. And today, things are a lot better in regards as where money is, and my business is doing really good. Probably about 5 or 6 years ago, we came and painted the sanctuary here at this church. I keep getting these really huge jobs that seem over my head, but they always work out. I always get them done, and the people are always really happy with my work. And God just continues to bless me as long as I keep doing His will first in my life and hanging out with you guys. And I appreciate y'all inviting me to be out here tonight. Thanks.